Kia ora, kofu smithaho. Ngā mai ki te whare, welcome to the House. When MPs return to Parliament after a break, there is often a backlog of events that vie for attention and that might need addressing. They might be the aftermath of news stories, policy announcements, scandals, or attention-seeking stunts. Sometimes it's all just a political joust, but on occasion the Speaker will get dragged in as well, because they are the arbiter of the rules, Parliament's landlord, and the head of the legislative branch of government. Now, some weeks it can be hard to guess what will capture MPs' attention.
Honourable members, on Monday, the Honourable David Seymour drove a vehicle onto the steps of Parliament. He stopped when a security officer intervened. I commend that officer for his actions.
Other weeks it's more obvious. A previous attempt to drive a vehicle up Parliament's front steps led to a criminal charge, but it also garnered enormous attention, and some lessons are easier to remember than others.
I doubt he would have ever expected to have to tell a member of the House not to drive a vehicle onto the steps of the building, particularly given that it was a repeat of the 2003 event, and in light of the enhanced security arrangements that Parliament has since put in place.
You certainly might have thought so. You might also wonder exactly what punishment might ensue for clowning around on the front steps in front of an invited audience. Well, there are 4 or 5 layers of rules and penalties that could apply here, so let's outline them. Parliament's got its own rules, called the standing orders. The Speaker is their arbiter, or for more serious ones, decides whether there is a case to answer.
In consideration of this matter, it's clear there are no standing orders that could reasonably support a referral to the Privileges Committee. I've expressed to Mr Seymour my strong displeasure at his actions and my concern at his belief that MPs should be able to do what he did is of right. They do not.
The Speaker, Jerry Brownlee, is correct. The standing orders don't really cover MPs' misbehaviour unless it occurs inside the chamber or in a select committee. So if you manage to drive all the way up the steps, through the doors, through the Great Hall and into the chamber while it is sitting, that would be a breach. But then that would be a lot of things, and a breach of privilege might be the least of them. So the standing orders do not apply here, but they're not the only rules. MPs do also, since very recently, have a code of conduct. But that code was written to address problems with the bullying of staff, sexual harassment, inappropriate relationships, and so on. Dumb driving isn't really its remit. What else is there? When Shane Ardern got a lot further up the steps on a tractor in 2003 and looked like he might just tumble back down onto those below, he was charged by the police.
The question of possible prosecution, as was the case in 2003, is a matter for the police and not in the hands of the Speaker.
The charge police landed on was disorderly behaviour, and that was eventually dropped. By the way, even if the police got very serious and David Seymour was found guilty of, say, dangerous driving, he would not lose his job. MPs lose their seats if they're convicted of a crime with a prison sentence potentially exceeding 2 years. Dangerous driving tops out at 3 months, and all of that seems unlikely. As a minister, Seymour is also bound by yet another set of rules, the Cabinet Manual. It includes a code of conduct for ministers, with the expectations of both personal and official actions like this one. Ministers are expected to act lawfully and behave in a way that upholds and is seen to uphold the highest ethical and behavioural standards. The arbiter of these rules is the Prime Minister, which is why this topic also came up in question time. Here's Chris Hipkins to Christopher Luxon.
Does he stand by his comment that David Seymour has not breached the Cabinet Manual, given the Cabinet Manual says that ministers must conduct themselves in a manner appropriate to their office, are expected to act lawfully, and are seen to uphold the highest ethical and behavioural standards, including good judgment, given recent revelations that David Seymour intervened in a police murder investigation, referred a sexual abuse survivor to an ACT Party lawyer rather than to the police, and just yesterday potentially illegally attempted to drive a Land Rover up the front steps of Parliament?
Yes.
Supplementary question, Mr Speaker. Is he therefore confident that driving a Land Rover up the front steps of Parliament is a lawful activity?
Ultimately, that's a decision for the Speaker, and he's addressed that today.
The Prime Minister was appearing to struggle slightly with the difference between Parliament's standing orders and New Zealand law. Only one of those is administered by the Speaker. Either way, it seems that Mr Seymour is not under threat from those rules either. There is one final court that can get involved in an MP's antics, but only if the jury has a very long memory. The Court of Public Opinion, i.e. elections.
My own view is that the public will make their own determination about the appropriateness or otherwise of the action, and that's something that all of us can remove ourselves from if we wish, but in the end the public makes that judgment and is often a lot more harsh than we might be.
This is the court that MPs sometimes fear the most, but ironically it's the exact same group of people that MPs are looking to impress when they engage in attention-seeking stunts. That story was originally broadcast in the Tuesday edition of The House. There's been plenty of argy-bargy about the topic in the House since then, including on Thursday, when the Speaker began the day with a further ruling which included these comments.
May I thank the many email correspondents who have encouraged me to take a range of actions, none of which are permissible. I suggest they accept that standing orders don't currently anticipate responses to this situation. This was the case in 2003, and it hasn't changed since then. Criminal law applies now as it did then.
He noted that any new rule would need to come from the Standing Orders Committee and not from him.
I am in an interesting position of many expecting an action without a sound basis for that to be undertaken. I'm interested in the application of standing orders that relate to the parliamentary proceedings and MP privilege as it relates to those proceedings. In my opinion, it's not possible to prescribe broad enough orders that achieve both protection of privilege and prosecution of stupid. This may be something that the Standing Orders Committee is more able to clearly define. Accordingly, I'll seek to convene that committee in the sitting week of 3 to 7 March.
I quite like the phrase, prosecution of stupid, though it's not clear whether that was intended as a noun or an adjective.
In my opinion, it's not possible to prescribe broad enough orders that achieve both protection of privilege and prosecution of stupid.
He may be right. There was one set of Parliament's many rules that we neglected to mention in Tuesday's story, and the Speaker hasn't raised them either. And those are the rules that cover the behaviour of anyone protesting or demonstrating in Parliament's grounds. The Land Rover stunt was part of a charity demonstration, so the rules apply, and they specifically include MPs. They also include the line, participants must not mount the main steps, which is pretty clear. One reason the Speaker may not have mentioned this rule is that the only penalty that I'm aware of being imposed for their contravention is the offender being trespassed from Parliament. Now, even if that were feasible, it's not really likely. Apart from anything else, it would provide lots of publicity, which would be like Goldilocks punishing the 3 bears with extra helpings of porridge. OK, enough on that. Let's get some actual parliamentary business and a report from Thursday.
Mr Speaker, the Prime Minister's statement is meant to give New Zealanders a sniff of where this government is going. Some semblance of a vision.
And we are not going to stand by like those people on the sidelines complaining. We're going to get on and make the decisions that get New Zealand back on track.
Parliament has now finished its second sitting week of the year, and so far it's been dominated by a single piece of business, a lengthy set-piece debate on the Prime Minister's statement. The purpose of that statement is to set out the government's plan for the year. The debate that follows it is intended as an examination of that plan. And after 13 hours of that, it ends with a vote over whether Parliament continues to have confidence in the current administration. Well, that's the idea anyway. The debate ended on Wednesday evening, and surprise, surprise, the government retains the confidence of the majority of the House. Despite the duration, the debate receives scant attention, so here's a taster of its themes and variations, as demonstrated on its final day.
Growth, growth, growth. That's what this government is about. I'll say it again, growth, growth, growth.
Nationals MP for Northland, Grant McCallum, nicely boiled it down. It had been the Prime Minister's focus, and all National MPs kept to that theme. Their colleagues from ACT and New Zealand First did as well, though often with a little bit more specificity. From ACT, Nicole McKee.
One of the things that we're going to do in the first instance, Mr. Speaker, is make sure that we remove the 3 confusing bodies that are meant to give advice to our businesses and make it just one.
National MPs did also sometimes get into the specifics, though mostly it was about things done last year, not plans for this year. While government MPs are expected to discuss the future, opposition MPs have the task of critique. Kushla Tangaire Manuel.
But so underwhelming was the Prime Minister's statement, it almost isn't worth rebutting. They say it's about growth.
A lot of that opposition critique was also on the theme of growth. Duncan Webb.
The fact of the matter is that we handed over an economy that was growing, an economy that had 2.4% growth per annum. And how much growth has this government had? None. They have gone backwards for every single quarter. The economy under this government is in recession.
The pattern in these multi-day debates is that each day begins with opposing heavyweights. Wednesday, for example, began with Chris Bishop, here on growth again, but attacking the opposition.
It's easy to say you're in favour of growth. There's always a but. I'm in favour of growth, but growth's got to be equitable, as if that's a real thing. Growth's got to be sustainable. I'm in favour of growth as long as it doesn't involve foreigners making money. I'm in favour of growth as long as it doesn't involve trading with the rest of the world.
And the opposition heavyweight following Bishop was Kieran McAnulty.
This government is arrogant. It is incompetent. It is disingenuous. It is heartless. And it is cruel.
Notably, during his speech, he employed a creative array of adjectives to sidestep the parliamentary rule that says you can't describe your opponent as a liar. And he didn't. He opted for disingenuous, telling fibs, not true, far from true, not even close to true, misleading, rubbish, and bull. The extraordinary thing is that no one objected. This debate is long enough that most MPs get to speak, and while opposition MPs often speak at length, for government backbenchers, that's unusual, and many took the chance to highlight something from their own electorate while they were there, like National's Miles Anderson.
I'd just like to give a shout out to the Tota estate, which will be celebrating National Lamb Day on Saturday.
Or National's Rima Nakle.
If you're around Takanini, come to Manukau Super Bowl this weekend. Starting on Thursday, we've got the Auckland Lantern Festival. That's going to be absolutely amazing.
So growth was the overriding theme, but the method was often repetition. So we'll end with a few examples of that. Here's National's final speaker, Simeon Brown, with an increasingly common rhetorical device in the House, the call and response.
Yes to things like more tourism into the country. What did they say? No. Yes to more farming and backing our farmers. What do they say? No. Yes to more mining. What do they say? No! Yes to more solar, wind and geothermal through our fast-track legislation.
Of course, repetition works both ways. Here's Labour's Arena Williams speaking just prior to Simeon Brown.
The legacy of this one-term government will be saying no to school lunches. It will be saying no to the 2,200 nurses that we need in our health system right now when they are asking for jobs.
Yes and no are not the only words you're allowed to repeat, though. You can use whole phrases. In this case, the rhetorical device, anaphora, the repetition of an opening phrase.
And they tell regions around the country, we don't have money for your hospital. We don't have money to replace your orthopaedic surgeons. We don't have money to replace your birthing unit. We don't have money to fund our roads that we promised. We don't have money to fund houses. We don't have money to fund early childhood education despite our promises. We're going to make it so hard to apply to save ourselves money.
That debate, now ended, was a hefty 13 hours. The result, though, was never much in doubt. You've been listening to The House. It's a whakaranga koe ki te whare. This program is produced with funding from Parliament's Office of the Clerk. Mā te wā.